My brother Jason thought he had everything under control until he started lying in ways that would make even the devil blush. That day, he came home not empty-handed, but with dangerous secrets and friends who looked like they stepped out of a horror movie. When I saw him clenching his fists in fear, I realized our whole family was teetering on the edge of a cliff. But this was just the prelude to something far worse brewing beneath the surface. My name is Kevin, I'm 22, and if you've ever wondered what life looks like in a thriller with dark comedy elements, here's my story. It's like a script for a horror movie where the leading star is my older brother Jason, who's 26. To everyone, he's the perfect son, while I seem to be just an unnoticed detail in his masterpiece. But beneath that facade lies something truly sinister, and it seems only I can see it. One day, while lounging in my room surrounded by gaming consoles and pizza remnants, it hit me. What the fuck is going on? Usually, our home feels like a commercial for family values. Mom baking her famous cookies, Dad talking about work as if it were the best show in the world, and Jason shining like he just stepped off the cover of a glossy magazine, bragging about his academic and athletic successes. Everything seemed perfect, but now it feels like a chilling performance. His laughter has become as strained as an old rubber band, and I realize that behind his perfect smile lies something dark and vile. The last few weeks of his late-night returns felt like the same old script. He always came home late, as if he had just escaped a sinister party. His eyes glowed with a strange light, like he returned from a mental institution with a stash of new ideas. I noticed him whispering with guys who looked like they had just escaped from a crime drama. It was unsettling. Inside me, everything trembled, as if I were caught in the eye of a hurricane, and I knew something was off in our family, an ominous feeling that was as persistent as an old commercial. I was now certain that trouble was approaching like a storm on the horizon. This wasn't just a typical family drama. It was a dark trap where I found myself as the protagonist, needing to untangle this complex mess. How the hell did I get into this mess? I thought, while everyone around seemed content and happy, and I stood frozen in fear, unsure of what would happen next. This world, where everything seemed normal, could turn into a nightmare in an instant, and I felt like I was already on the edge. The only question was whether I could prevent the fall or if I would tumble down with it. Things took a turn for the worse when I learned about Jason's debts. One day, during dinner, as we sat around the table like in the good old days, Jason suddenly scrunched his face as if someone pinched him. I didn't know what was going on until I noticed him nervously twisting his fork, as if trying to snap it into tiny pieces. This was not normal. "You wouldn't believe what it's like to hit rock bottom," he blurted out, and I understood this was not just a phrase. He was no longer the guy who always had it together. An alarm bell started ringing in my head. Dad has always decided to intervene with his parental wisdom. "We all face difficulties, son." "Sure, but some people's difficulties are failing an exam, while Jason's are debts." I caught his gaze, full of hatred and fear, and that told me something was very wrong. At that moment, I decided I wouldn't sit idly by while my brother was in such a predicament. My inner detective kicked in, and I started digging deeper. It turned out Jason owed a ton of money to his friends from gambling. It hit me like lightning in the heart. He had always been like this, but now it was bordering on absurdity. What a nightmare of a brother. I thought that after all those golden years in our family, he would at least learn to value money instead of handing it out left and right, as if it grew on trees. I decided to talk to him privately. Secrets can't be kept forever, and I had a plan. We met in his room, and gathering my thoughts, I said, "Jason, what the hell is going on? You know I can help." But instead of a response, I received nothing but a disdainful look, as if I had suggested he go to a party with Grandma. "You don't understand, Kevin. You'll never understand," he shot back, immediately closing off like an oyster retreating into its shell. His words were like a knife to the heart. I felt he wasn't just going through tough times. He was doing everything he could to drag me into his quicksand. That moment felt like a ghost crashing a party where it wasn't invited. I began to realize I was standing on the edge of a cliff, and if I didn't take a step, I would lose him forever. But how can you help someone who doesn't want help? Damn, it was a real puzzle. The situation was getting more eerie, as if I were in a horror movie with comedic elements where every joke about death ended with a creepy coffin. With each passing day, Jason continued to sink deeper, and his behavior grew stranger. For example, one evening, he came home with a group of characters who looked like they had just escaped from some crime thriller. They wore leather jackets and had tattoos, each one a living work of art, but with rusty edges. I didn't know how to comment. "Well, you've got some cool friends, Jason. I hope they're not planning on a pizza and gambling party," I quipped, eyeing his company. They stood there as if they had just crawled out of a sewer, exchanging glances that seemed to say, "We don't know you, but this might be your last night." Jason just snorted in response, but I knew that beneath this mask of confidence were tears and fear. When he began to open up about his secrets, I realized he was trying to create a real mess. "Hey bro, I've got a bunch of people waiting for their money," he said, his voice sounding like he had just flunked a chemistry test and didn't know how to explain it to his parents in a matter of seconds. I barely held back a laugh. "At rock bottom? Dude, you're already lower than the deepest pit in the world," I shot back, trying not to laugh. He kept going as if he hadn't heard my words. "You don't want me to hit rock bottom with guys like this." At that moment, I imagined how they might throw their creative evening. "Listen, Jason, if your friends are anything like you describe, they won't sit down at the table with you when you run out of money. They might even donate you their pizza just so you can survive," I said with a sarcastic smirk. It felt like banging my head against a wall. He didn't realize how deep he had gone. I thought we were close brothers, but now he looked like a lost ship in a stormy sea trying to find port. His thoughts revolved around money, and I knew he needed to change something fast, or he would lose not just his money, but everything he had. "Listen, Jason, if you don't stop hanging out with these guys, you'll soon have no money and no pants," I added sarcastically. He just shrugged as if it didn't bother him at all. How can someone be so oblivious to what's happening around them? His world was crumbling, yet he continued to pretend everything was fine, as if he and his friends were planning a spa night instead of a gangster club outing. Every time I confronted Jason, I felt like he was trying to set a trap. The tension in the room was palpable, like a cloud of lightning hanging overhead, ready to unleash a storm. Not only were my relations with him spiraling, but the atmosphere at home felt charged, like energy coalescing before a hurricane. My parents started showing signs of concern, but as usual, they tried to act like everything was fine. I was on edge. Every time I heard the sound of his door, my heart began to pound as if it decided to put on its own concert. What the hell did he do this time? One day, he came home with a bruised face, his eyes shining with fear like a deer caught in headlights. It wasn't exactly an optimistic sight. "You have no idea who I've been dealing with," he said, his voice trembling, and at that moment, I knew the situation had reached a critical point. I looked at him like he had just walked out of a survival movie, thinking, "Dude, if you're looking for sympathy, you're definitely barking up the wrong tree." "Hey, Jason, aren't you being a bit dramatic? Or did you just come to show off your battle scars?" I asked sarcastically, winking to lighten the mood. But his response was full of panic, and I suddenly realized that things could end very badly. He threw me a desperate look, like I was his last hope. "You don't get it. They're after me," he said, sounding like he was talking about monsters under the bed. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. "After you? What, have you been playing some kind of tabletop role-playing game?" I quipped, trying to inject a bit of humor. "This isn't a joke, Kevin. They're really dangerous," he shouted, and at that moment, I understood his fear wasn't just another piece of drama. His eyes filled with tears, but he quickly held them back, as if showing any weakness would be a disgrace. "Look, if they're so dangerous, maybe you should spend a few seconds figuring out how to get out of this mess," I asked, though deep down, I knew it wouldn't help. Jason was already tangled in his web, and I didn't know how to pull him out if he wasn't willing to help himself. The tension was building, like the air before a storm, and I could feel that every new word could be the last straw that broke the camel's back. I thought about how, if he didn't take action, things would end very badly for him. And then it hit me. Maybe I couldn't just sit around and wait. I needed to act. But what could I do when he was the one caught in this trap? I couldn't stay in the shadows any longer. The pressure was mounting, and I knew I had to step in. But how? My thoughts were spinning like drunken pickles on a carousel, and my heart was pounding like a drum at a rock concert. If I had known I'd end up in such a messed up situation with my brother, I probably would have spent my money on something more useful than console games. But here I was, gathering intel like a spy in a Hollywood blockbuster, trying to make sense of the dark dealings he'd entangled himself in. At first it seemed like a game, but it soon became clear that this was no joke. Jason wasn't just dragging himself into trouble. He was diving headfirst into it, as if he were searching for a prize at the bottom of the ocean. I was watching him like he was a dangerous enemy, studying his every move, and it was becoming a real test for me. Every call he made, every message he received became a point of suspicion. Eventually, I decided I couldn't stand his secrets anymore. Inside me, there was a growing tension, like a tiny nuclear bomb ready to go off. I gathered all my courage and prepared for a conversation that could change everything. That day, the sun was shining so brightly, it felt like life itself was winking at me, saying, "You got this, man." We met in his room, and I stood before him, ready for battle, like a gladiator facing his opponent. "Jason, you have to admit things aren't going well. I'm not going to stand by while you keep sinking lower and lower," I said, trying to keep my cool, though inside, everything was turning upside down. His eyes darkened, like a stormy sky, and he withdrew into himself again, like an oyster hiding in its shell. I saw him clenching his fists, as if he was about to cast some kind of spell to erase all this drama. But I knew I couldn't back down. "Listen, this isn't just a game, bro. You're not just at rock bottom. You're in hell already, and you don't stand a chance unless you start making the right choices." At that moment, I realized he was truly in over his head, and if I didn't help him now, I would lose him forever. My words weren't just a cry for help. They were the wake-up call he needed to hear. "You're not alone in this, Jason. I'm here to help, but only if you want it," I added, hoping he would finally see the light at the end of his dark tunnel. It felt like juggling bombs. Every word could explode the situation. I sensed the darkness closing in on our family, and it was terrifying. Looking at Jason, I understood he had become a stranger, a ghost from a horror story. We used to be brothers, and now it felt like we stood on opposite sides of a barricade. But I was uneasy too. Every time I heard his footsteps, it felt like the ground beneath me was shifting. My heart raced as if landmines had been laid all around. When he finally decided to share his problems, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff. "Come on, Kevin. Choose your next move. Save him, or save yourself," echoed in my head, as if I had an inner voice staging a drama straight out of a thriller. One evening, as our family sat down for dinner, like actors in a play, I felt it was time to act. The table was set as if we were celebrating a milestone, but there was an invisible elephant in the room named Jason. I knew I had to do this for myself and for our parents. Inside, my determination bubbled like water in a boiling pot, and I prepared to unveil the truth. "Hey guys," I started, trying to sound like a party host. "We need to talk about something important." It felt like throwing a grenade into the room. All eyes snapped to me. My parents froze, as if I had uttered some sacred mantra. I overheard some conversations and found a few secrets we all need to discuss. Once I opened that Pandora's box of secrets, everything spiraled downhill. That evening, when I decided to lay it all out, the tension in the house was nearly palpable. The next morning, when I woke up, the first thing I noticed was my phone buzzing like a Christmas tree. I grabbed it, unable to believe my eyes. Several messages from Jason that sounded like they were straight out of a horror film. "You picked the wrong side, Kevin. Be ready for the consequences." What the hell was this? I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Seriously, Jason? These are your threats? Can you at least try to be original?" I muttered, replaying all possible scenarios in my head. At first I tried not to panic, but then it dawned on me. This wasn't just words. My brother had become that very monster he had always warned about. That thought was as horrifying as discovering that Santa Claus was actually a maniac in a costume. I could feel the anxiety swelling, like a tsunami ready to crash down on our home. With each passing minute, the panic in the family only grew. My parents noticed I was becoming more anxious and started asking questions. "Kevin, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," my mom said, and I barely held back from exploding. "Yeah, Mom, just my brother threatening me, nothing special." I realized I had no choice at this point. I had to do something. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the boy who just wanted to have fun anymore. I saw someone who understood that this wasn't just a family squabble. It was a real threat. I began considering my options. "All right, Kevin, you can't let this end badly," I whispered to myself. "You need to contact the police or a lawyer. And that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're smart." With that thought, I dialed the local precinct and gathered all my courage. "Hi, this is Kevin. I'm having some problems with my brother. Yes, threats. And yes, it sounds like I'm in some cheesy movie. But damn it, this is real life." I heard the operator on the other end hesitantly ask, "Are you sure this is serious?" And in that moment, I understood I could no longer hide. If I didn't take a step, I might lose everything, my family and myself. Now I knew I had to protect myself and my parents from this madness, and nothing would stop me. "Yes, it's serious, and I'm ready to act. So let's get this situation sorted before it spirals out of control," I said, feeling my determination boiling up again. Eventually, after all the fights and emotional turmoil, when the hurricane of passions had calmed, my family gathered around the table like characters in some silly sitcom. The atmosphere was tense, but a light excitement hung in the air. "So, guys, maybe it's time we talk about how to move forward?" I said, trying to sound optimistic, as if I had just won the lottery. We settled down as if this was our last hope for salvation. Mom started calling everyone to the table like it was some family ritual. "Let's forget the bad stuff and plan something fun. How about a weekend trip?" she suggested, and it felt like balm for our wounds. Dad, with his endless wisdom, nodded. "That's a great idea. We all need a distraction and some time together." I felt hope ignite inside me. "Let's go to the lake. Remember when we used to go boating and fishing while Mom tried to feed us her awful sandwiches?" I threw out, eliciting laughter from my parents. This wasn't just a plan. It was a chance to rebuild our connection and possibly leave the dark shadows behind. As we built our plans for the future, I began discovering something new. After all the drama and chaos, I decided to take up photography. It was unexpected for me, but I realized it would help me not only cope with my emotions, but also rebuild my trust in people. I picked up an old camera that had been gathering dust on the shelf and went out for a walk around the neighborhood. "Hey world, I see you through this lens, and yes, you can be beautiful," I joked to myself as I snapped photos. With each shot, I felt my confidence building. The moment I captured the perfect sunset or a passerby's smile, I understood that this little passion could become something more. I started sharing my photos with friends, and it felt like a ray of sunshine in a gray world. New connections, new emotions. It helped me rediscover people I had almost lost amid all the fights and suffering. In the end, though life was full of drama, I found a way back to myself and my family. We were planning a trip, I had a new passion, and damn it, I was starting to see the world in brighter colors. Life was moving forward, and I knew that despite all the challenges, we could handle anything because we were family. And now, as the sun shone on the horizon, I could finally say, yes, life is good. Life is